Dark Side of the Ring. Final 2 episodes of the season. This past week it was the last ride of the Road Warriors. Snack on danger, dine on death. Focusing on Hawk and Animal, how they came together as a team, ultimately how their team fell apart. Animal made reference on this episode to the Road Warrior Pop. That's an expression that I've heard other wrestlers use over the years. When talking about big crowd reactions, they always measure it against the old Road Warrior Pop. Because when these two guys at their peak back in the 80s would walk out, even early 90s, but especially early to mid 80s, these guys would walk out, place would erupt. There was no team more popular, there was no team more dominant in all of wrestling than the Road Warriors. Some would say the greatest tag team of all time. I guess that it just depends on what you look for in tag team wrestling. If you're looking for two big, badass guys who just go out there and beat people up and look cool with the shoulder spikes and the face paint and the music, then they were the total package. If you're more of a finesse guy or girl, maybe you like the Hart Foundation. Maybe you like the British Bulldogs. Maybe you like the Rock and Roll Express. Everybody's got their opinion. But a lot of people would call the Road Warriors the greatest, most dominant tag team of all time. And they're the only team ever to hold the AWA, NWA, and WWF tag team titles, which shows you just how big they were everywhere they went. They were stars everywhere they went. They were champions everywhere they went. And they also got over, you got to remember this, they got over in an era with some of the greatest tag teams of all time. Tag team wrestling was thriving. I wasn't even watching AWA as a kid, or NWA, not too much, unless I was at my grandparents' house. Wasn't watching too much NWA back then. Growing up in the Northeast, I was a WWF guy, so that was what I was exposed to, Demolition and all those teams. But I knew exactly who the Road Warriors were because of their look. Every wrestling magazine, the cover, or I'd buy Pro Wrestling Illustrated or some other non-WWF wrestling magazine. They were always there. There they were. Face paint, shoulder spikes, you can't miss it. You don't forget something like that. Now, I didn't really learn too much in the way of new information with this episode. I didn't really expect to. They interviewed Animal. They interviewed Barry Darsow, who introduced himself as Repo Man and Demolition Smash. In that order. He'll always be Demolition Smash to me before Repo Man. Or Crusher Khrushchev, or Hole-in-One Darsow. Remember in WCW, he was the golfer. Hole-in-One. They interviewed Nikita Koloff, who we have seen, if you are an NWA Power fan, you've seen him recently on NWA Power. Looks pretty good. He looks great, actually. Paul Ellering, who managed LOD pretty much everywhere they went. Scott Norton. Yet another wrestler, one of many, many, many wrestlers to come out of that Minneapolis area. Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, Ray Traylor, Hawk and Animal, Scott Norton. God, I'm missing like half a dozen other names of people who came out of Minneapolis. They actually found Eddie Sharkey. 84-year-old Eddie Sharkey was interviewed briefly for this episode. He was known as the trainer of champions. And for good reason. Not only did he help train the Road Warriors, among the other names he trained, and this isn't even all of them. Now, what does training mean? Because Animal does make mention of the fact that when they were training, Sharkey did, the instruction that he did was mostly just outside sitting in a chair. So it wasn't, how hands-on he was with everybody, I don't know. But he's called the trainer of champions for a reason. He trained Jesse Ventura, Bob Backlund, Rick Rude, Barry Darsow, Nikita Koloff, the Berserker, John Nord, Rick Steiner, Jerry Lynn, Medusa, even Eric Rowan. Trained Eric Rowan, who is now going by the name of Eric Redbeard. He is no longer Rowan, he is now Redbeard. They also interviewed Hawk's two brothers, Rich and Dan Hegg Strand, who helped kind of fill in what Hawk was like outside of the ring as Mike. He was a crazy man. Plain and simple. And you've probably heard stories about Road Warrior Hawk over the years. There's this famous story of not just one fight, but multiple fights and incidents over a period of a few years between him and Randy Savage. I've talked about it on the show before. It's kind of the stuff of legend. And not to detour too much because they didn't talk about this here, but just to give you a quick overview of what that was about. Years earlier, I'm thinking like 94 maybe. This might have been right after Savage went to WCW maybe. I don't know, but they were out to dinner. I think it was Savage and Hawk and his wife at the time. And I think the story supposedly is that Hawk got up to go to the bathroom and Savage made a pass at his wife, or a very inappropriate comment that he made, or an offer to Hawk's wife, which she rebuffed, and Hawk never knew. She never said anything to Hawk. Hawk didn't know. And I guess it was a few years later. I don't know who told him, but somebody said something to him and tipped him off. And maybe the timeline's off. Maybe it was 92 and not 94. Again, I'm not sure, but it was years later that Hawk found out about this. And he was pissed. And they were in Japan and Savage was getting ready for a match. And I think Hawk confronted him and smacked him or something. And Savage never forgot that. And then years later, I think they were at a concert. Gorgeous George was Macho Man's girlfriend at the time. She's talked about the incident before. She has her version of events. Hawk had his version of events. They came to blows in the bathroom. Supposedly they got in a fight. Urinals were ripped off the wall. I can just picture this in my head. So yes, there was definitely bad blood between Hawk and Randy Savage. But Hawk loved to beat people up. He loved to get into fights. According to his own brothers, Scott Norton said that he would even punch himself. When he knew him as a kid in school, he would punch himself in the face, just to condition himself to what it was like to get punched in the face. I mean, here in New York, if they see you punching yourself in the face on the street, they throw you into a padded cell. They don't give you a job as a pro wrestler. Anyway, he channeled all of this into weightlifting. That's how he met Animal. They met one day in Jesse Ventura's gym. And that's how their friendship began. They started bouncing at a bar together in Minneapolis. Animal says the owner also dealt cocaine, and he would send Hawk and Animal sometimes out to collect if somebody wasn't paying up. Ole Anderson, he first brought Animal down to Atlanta as the Road Warrior singles. And if you've never seen Animal dressed in his Daisy Dukes, like something out of the Village People, he's lucky his career didn't die right then and there. His girlfriend got pregnant, so he married her, and he would send money back home to support his wife, to support his kid, but he wasn't making nearly as much money as he was making bouncing at the bar. So he just said, the hell with this, I'm going back. So he went back to Minneapolis, and I guess he and Hawk, and they were bouncing at the bar again. And then Ole comes to find out later on, I guess Ole didn't give up. Ole came to find out later on about Hawk. He didn't even know Hawk existed. He goes, what, there's two of them? He goes, that's perfect. That's when he realized, I got to put these two guys together, these two monsters together as a tag team. And so off they went to Georgia Championship Wrestling. They got Paul Ellering as their manager, and Ole pitched him on the idea of borrowing their look from the bad guy in the Mad Max movie that came out back in 81, The Road Warrior. The name, the mohawk, the shoulder pads, it all was just blatantly lifted from that movie. And Hawk got the idea for Animal to shave his head into a mohawk. Hawk would shave his head into a double mohawk, one on each side. So that way, it looked like if they put their heads together, it looked like they were like plugging Animal's mohawk into Hawk's double mohawk, like he's plugging it into an outlet. And I am embarrassed to say, I never put that together. I just thought they shaved their heads that way just to be unique. After all these years, I didn't know why it was done that way. Where if you took Animal's mohawk, it went right in the middle, right in between Hawk's. I never put it together. I never put it together. I guess I did learn something new watching this. The shoulder pads with the spikes, according to Ellering, that was all Animal's idea. Animal had a friend who worked for Honeywell at the time. He may have been an engineer, whatever he was, but he called up this friend and said, listen, I got this idea. Can you get these spikes? And I want chains on them and everything. And so the look just kind of went from there. Once they started working in Japan, this is where things kind of got a little crazy with all the Hawk stories, but once they started working in Japan, Hawk got mixed up with the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza. So he would be out until all hours of the night. Maybe he was down in Roppongi. I don't know. Animal was not as wild. Animal said, look, I was no angel. I'm sure Animal drank and did things that probably shouldn't have been doing. But by all accounts, everybody who knew them, the people who talked about it, even here in this episode, Hawk was the crazy one. Animal was the more level-headed one, who tried to kind of watch after Hawk, that he wouldn't go too crazy. Animal, in some ways, was kind of the voice of reason, trying to keep things together between the two of them. That's the main theme that you get from listening to Darso and Norton and all these different people. And it clearly led to issues. It led to a rift over time between Hawk and Animal. Hawk was a wild man. And Animal was sort of the glue that held things together. And the two of them were very lucky. They got in and they really got their big break and got over. Right when Vince McMahon started expanding nationally and started raiding talent from a lot of these different territories. So when Hogan, for example, jumped from the AWA to WWF, and AWA lost one of their biggest stars, and they ended up losing a lot more than just Hogan. Jesse Ventura, Gene Okerlund, all these different people left the AWA and went to go work for Vince McMahon. Vern Gagne saw the Road Warriors, hitting it big everywhere they were going and said, hey, I want to bring you guys in to help fill the void. So they were brought in his heels. They got over as baby faces. Why wouldn't they? Look at them. Just look at these two. They look cool. They beat everybody up. They had badass theme music, which was never mentioned in this episode. How do you not mention that? How do you not mention Iron Man by Black Sabbath? That was a huge part of their act when they would come out, was that Iron Man song. Talked about the Scaffold Match from Starrcade in '86, the Night of the Skywalkers. That's where Hawk and Animal wrestled the Midnight Express in a scaffold match. This is the match where Jim Cornette fell. He was hanging from the bottom of the scaffold. He was dangling. This was after the match. And the whole idea was, because Jim Cornette is afraid of heights. He probably didn't want to do it at all, but he figured it's going to be a big crowd. I know I might get hurt, but let's do it. The idea was that Big Bubba, who would go on to be the Big Boss Man, he was one of Cornette's guys. He would stand below, and he would catch him. He would either catch him or break his fall. Well, Bubba had sunglasses on. He wore shades. He couldn't see Cornette when he was falling. He misjudged, I guess, the timing or the positioning. So when Cornette let go and he dropped straight down, legs first, and his knees just buckled underneath him. Bubba didn't catch him at all. I don't even think Bubba touched him. He fell right in front of him. How do you miss? How do you miss? Even The Miz is like, how do you miss? My God. And Cornette tore all the ligaments in one of his knees, which he never had surgery for because he said, I'll miss too much time. I can't have surgery. So he went to the doctor to get his knee drained. He said there was so much blood coming out of that knee. They had to get a bedpan just to contain all of the blood. That's how much blood came out of this guy's knee. But Hawk wrestled that match with a broken leg. He had broken his leg. He had a boot on. He had just gotten hurt a few days earlier there. I guess they were on a tour of Japan. And he broke his leg. Now, the whole leg wasn't broken. It might have been a broken bone or whatever. But still, the guy had a broken leg. And he had to wrestle in a scaffold match. He had to climb to the top of a scaffold with a broken leg. So that sort of started this whole cycle of dependency, according to Animal. And so Hawk was doing a lot of drinking. He was taking muscle relaxers. And things got really bad. They got worse once they went to WWE. They had just signed, when they went to WWE, said Vince McMahon had just signed the modern day warrior, Kerry Von Erich, which they never even called him the modern day warrior. So I'm not sure why there would have been a conflict. But they had just signed the modern day warrior. They already had the ultimate warrior. And Vince McMahon said, look, can you guys come up with a different name? Imagine being Vince McMahon. You just signed the Road Warriors, one of the most popular teams in the world. Hey, can you guys change your name? But, for them, thankfully, they had another name they could just, use very easily and just kind of slide in there because people for years had referred to them interchangeably, mostly as the Road Warriors, but sometimes they called them the Legion of Doom. They already kind of had the LOD name, so they said to Vince, what about the Legion of Doom? And Animal said, oh, Vince loved it. Oh, that's great. Yes, yes, yes. We'll call you the Legion of Doom. Now, this was one of the biggest faux pas of the entire episode. This is the nerd coming out. Paul Ellering said that the Legion of Doom name originally that they were using, how they came up with it, it came from the old He-Man cartoon. Hawk used to love watching He-Man. And they'd be driving in the car, driving in the van on their way to the next show. And Hawk would be saying, back at the Legion of Doom. That's not from He-Man. That's from the old Super Friends cartoon. Animal even mentioned it on, WWE did a Road Warriors DVD many years ago. And Animal said it on there. That's where they got the name from. They got the name from the old Super Friends cartoon with all the evil villains coming together in the Legion of Doom. That was also the name of a stable that Paul Ellering led for a number of years. Jake Roberts was part of the Legion of Doom. Believe it or not, Jake Roberts was an original member of the Legion of Doom. So I don't know how they left that in there. Not only did they leave that in there in the episode, they even had footage. I don't know if they had to license the footage or not. Maybe not, because it's like a documentary. I mean, certainly they're not licensing the WWE footage they use. I guess for documentary purposes, they're allowed to just go ahead and use it. But they included footage of the old Masters of the Universe cartoon. I used to watch that Masters of the Universe cartoon as a kid. I used to run through the apartment with my giant He-Man sword and my shield, yelling, I am He-Man! And then I would crash into the recliner head on. I must have smacked my head into that thing I don't even know how many times. No wonder I am the way I am. Skeletor is the shit. But this was definitely not He-Man. So they came to WWE. And I guess one of the things I was disappointed in, I understand the focus of the episode was Hawk, the rise and fall of the team and Hawk's issues. But you had Barry Darsow. They interviewed Smash for this, because I guess he was also one of those Minnesota boys, and he was friendly with them and friendly with Animal. But I wish, given that they had Darsow there to be interviewed, I really wish they would have gotten a little bit more into the whole Demolition LOD thing, because for years the comparisons have been made. Oh, clearly Demolition they were Vince McMahon's ripoffs of the Road Warriors. I mean, come on. They didn't have spikes, but they had these things that looked like spikes and the face paint. There were definitely similarities between the two teams. I'm not prepared to sit here and say that it was just a blatant, straight-up ripoff. Well, we couldn't get the Road Warriors, so we'll just have our own Road Warriors. Because they also had the Powers of Pain came in. They also had face paint. And so I don't know that Demolition was just a straight-up ripoff of LOD. They definitely borrowed from their look, for sure. One of the things that made Demolition so cool, kind of like the Road Warriors, was the music. That Rick Derringer theme. It's one of my favorite WWE themes ever. They had this badass theme music that they came out to. They had the masks. They pulled the masks off when they would come to the ring. The Road Warriors didn't have masks, I don't think. They had the face paint. Demolition had the masks and the face paint. So there were similarities, but there were also differences between the two. But having grown up as a WWF fan, I was a huge fan of Demolition. Demolition's probably my favorite team of all time, because I grew up with them. And that music and that look, they were cool. To a young wrestling fan, they were cool. If you were an older wrestling fan, you probably looked at them and go, wait a minute, Bill Eadie, the Masked Superstar, what is this, But I didn't know from that at the time. First ever 3-time tag team champion. I think they were the first. Maybe they weren't the first, but they 3-peated as tag team champions. The big win over Andre and Haku at WrestleMania 6, which wasn't a great match, but boy, they blew the roof off the Sky Dome. It was great. Demolition was awesome. And it's a crime that we never got a proper program between these two teams when they came in. And they wanted them. Both teams wanted them. Animal in other shoot interviews has said, because he was good friends, when Barry Darsow found out that LOD was coming in, he talked to Animal. He said, "Guy, I'm looking forward to you guys coming in. We get to work together finally." And Animal's like, "Yeah, man, I can't wait." And then what did they do? LOD came in the summer of 1990. And the first thing they did, I don't know if it was televised or if this was just the live events, but Animal said the first thing they did, they put us right in the ring with Demolition and we beat them. It's the first thing they did. This is before Demolition even lost the belts to the Hart Foundation at SummerSlam. They put us right together with them. We're working matches on the road with them, and we're beating them every night. And so it was over. There was no program at that point. It was a very live event, house show driven business, and now you've already run this program and you've made Demolition look like a bunch of jabronis. And I hated the way that they jobbed out Demolition to these guys. I thought it was a slap in the face. Demolition, whether you want to say they were ripoffs or not, they had established themselves over a period of years on their own as being a solid act. If they were ripoffs, they broke away from that after a while. They became their own team. They were very popular. And Vince McMahon could look at them and say, you know what? They were my creation. Forget Hawk and Animal. He should have been proud to put these guys up on a pedestal and say, Hawk, Axe and Smash, we made Demolition. They didn't come in from somewhere else. But then as soon as the Road Warriors came in, it's like Demolition became second-class citizens in their own company. Now, I know that Axe had some health issues. I think he ate some shellfish or whatever, had an allergic reaction. He had some heart problems. And so that's why they brought in Crush. That sucked. The whole Axe, Smash, and Crush thing was stupid. But I guess Edie physically had to be out of the ring, and they had to do something. And so, the team really started to fall off anyway at that point. But, he was still there. He still had Axe there. It should have been a little more competitive. And they should have done something, For example, Easy Slam Dunk. Easy program heading into WrestleMania 7. How come we didn't get Demolition and LOD at WrestleMania 7? Instead, they blew the match off, like I said, as soon as they came in. And at WrestleMania, Hawk and Animal, they beat Hercules and Paul Roma in less than 60 seconds. They had a 60-second match at WrestleMania. They beat Power and Glory. Smash and Crush, they jobbed to Tenryu and Katao. Tenryu and Katao. Yes. Tenryu and Katao were brought in. I'm sure it was part of whatever this working agreement was between WWF and I think it was the SWS promotion in Japan at the time. Okay, so bring them in against somebody else. You have to have them bring them in to beat Demolition in 3 minutes and job them out? It's a disgrace how they treated Demolition before Darso moved on to do the Repo Man stuff. He kept his job. They moved him into a different gimmick. Crush, he ended up in a different gimmick. It's not like they just, fired the guys, but the way the Demolition fizzled out, absolute disgrace. So LOD, back to LOD. One of my Demolition rant. I can go on a rant about them not being in the Hall of Fame either, but that's a different story. I guess when you sue the company, that's what happens. They don't like that very much. So, Road Warriors go on, they beat Nasty Boys, they win the tag team titles at SummerSlam 91. And these guys are on top of the world. Then we get to 1992. And this was a very strange time. Because in February of 92, and this is me talking here, they didn't get into any of this on the episode. I wish they had, but again, the focus was on Hawk's troubles, I get it. This was not a biography as much as it was kind of an expose about Hawk's demons and what led to the downfall of the team. But I do wish they would have gotten into some of these other things. February 1992, heading into WrestleMania 8. WrestleMania 8's only about 2 months away. And at a live event, LOD drops the tag team titles to Money Incorporated. Hawk failed the drug test, which explains why we didn't see them again until WrestleMania. It's been said that Hawk, when they dropped the titles, he told the company, I don't want that match to be filmed. Didn't even want it to be filmed. I don't know if that's true or not. That sounds a little ridiculous to me. WWE did film it anyway. It's in their archives somewhere. Hopefully one day they will release it. At least that's my understanding. I don't know why it wouldn't have been taped. But what's just so bizarre about this is, again, the fact that they would drop the titles off television, never aired. Money Inc. was a new team. They had only recently made the decision to pair up Ted DiBiase and IRS. Originally, the idea, talk about a crazy idea. and I know this was talked about in the newsletters at the time, the original idea was to pair up Ted DiBiase as a tag team with a newly turned, newly heel Shawn Michaels. We almost had a DiBiase Shawn Michaels tag team. And instead they said, you know what, we're going to keep Shawn as a heel. We'll put Sherry with him. And they put IRS with DiBiase. That was the right call. I don't know what a Ted DiBiase Shawn Michaels team would have looked like, but I think things worked out for the better. But they had not even been Money Inc. on television. And they won the tag team titles, live event, LOD disappears. So then they come back. Fast forward to the summer. SummerSlam, 1992, Wembley Stadium, London, England, 80,000 people. And they're doing, and now Animal is talking about this here on the documentary. They're at Wembley, the day of the show. They're doing a run-through for the entrances because they're going to make these big entrances on these motorcycles, these Harley Davidsons. And they're doing a run-through, and Vince McMahon is telling them, okay, here's how it's going to go. Here's what to do. And he's getting annoyed because Hawk keeps interrupting him with these different ideas. He's constantly interrupting Vince McMahon. Well, it turns out that Hawk was just plastered on placidos. And so he's just completely out to lunch. Now, Animal made a very weird comment here. He said, basically, as a result of this, instead of them getting a tag team title match higher up on the card, like second or third from last towards the end of the show and fighting for the championships, instead they ended up being in the opening match, non-title, against Money Inc. This is the first time that I'm hearing this, unless I misunderstood Animal. It almost sounded like he was saying that going into SummerSlam that day, they were supposed to wrestle for the tag team titles later in the night, but when Vince saw how fucked up Hawk was, plans changed and they put them in the opening match, which makes no sense because for weeks, and I know this because I'm actually in the middle of watching all the Superstars episodes on the network from the summer of 92. It just so happens. For weeks before SummerSlam, they were promoting the Natural Disasters, who had just won the titles in July, again at a live event that never aired on TV. Second time in 92 that happened. Man, there were a lot of title changes in 92 that happened at live events that never aired on TV. Bret Hart won the WWF title from Ric Flair. That at least ended up on a Coliseum video. Yeah, a lot of non-televised big title changes in WWF in 1992. You would think house show business would have been better than it was. But it doesn't make sense because they were already promoting the Natural Disasters against the Beverly Brothers at least 2 weeks in advance for SummerSlam. So the only thing I can figure is either he's just all screwed up in his memory of this, or he's suggesting that the original plan, like a month or two before, the original plan was that they would wrestle Money Inc. maybe for the tag team belts at Wembley. But then plans changed about a month or two earlier. And instead they gave the belts to Earthquake and Typhoon at some live event. Because it just, again, they were not promoting LOD for a tag title match at SummerSlam. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So they get to SummerSlam. And they are in the opening contest. And Hawk is so inebriated before they come out for this match. Animal was worried, like, this guy's he's gonna tip over. I mean, we got to ride motorcycles to the ring. It's like of all the nights, we're making a motorcycle entrance. We're going to be on these vehicles, driving down to the ring in front of the biggest crowd, one of the biggest crowds of all time, like a legit 79,000 plus. I think they had in the stadium that night, and this guy is all fucked up. So they ride to the ring. Now, if you watch back, they ride to the ring just fine. Hawk's not swerving or anything like that. They've got that stupid puppet, Rocco, on the front of Paul Ellering's motorcycle. You know, the whole story of Rocco. They were walking one day in this vignette on Superstars through the rubble of their old childhood home in Chicago. The mean streets of Chicago, the house burned down. They're sifting through the rubble. All of a sudden, Paul Ellering sees this little hand coming out from the rubble. He pulls it out. Goes, "What's this?" Hawk and Animal go, "Oh my God, it's Rocco." It's like, who's Rocco? Rocco, he's our childhood friend. We used to talk to him and play with him as a kid. That was the birth of Rocco. For those of you wondering, why the fuck would the Legion of Doom be going around with a puppet? Now you know. But they get to the ring, and he didn't tell this story here. He told this story in other shoot interviews. Animal gets to the ring. Hawk did not park the motorcycle in the spot that he was supposed to park the motorcycle. I don't know why that would have mattered, but he didn't park it in the right spot. Caught Animal off guard. Animal had to basically sort of like hop off or jump off his own motorcycle. And in doing so, he hopped off on the wrong side and he scalded his leg on the exhaust pipe. So now he's burned his leg. He's in agonizing pain that, of course, he's no selling because he's Animal. You don't sell pain. But he was not very happy with Hawk for a lot of different reasons, for a myriad of different reasons. He was not very happy with Hawk. They couldn't even do their Doomsday device finish. If you go back and watch the match, I think Animal won with a power slam on DiBiase. Because they could not trust that Hawk would get to the top rope and not fall off. Animal said he's going to fall off. If he goes to the top rope, he's going to fall off. That's how messed up. Go back and watch the match. You can see how messed up Hawk is. You don't watch for it the first time you see it, but when you hear the story and you go back, and now it's like, holy shit, this guy was all screwed up. But think about it, not just the danger it puts him in. Think of the danger it puts everybody else in. That's what's really messed up about that. So the next television taping is in Hershey a few days later. Hawk's a no-show. He calls Vince McMahon's secretary, tells her he quits. He had already been very upset about money and different things. He quits the company. The story, the famous story there is Hawk was MIA in London. Hawk and the Berserker. Hawk and the Berserker, again, I think also a Minneapolis guy, if I'm not mistaken. They went AWOL in London doing God knows what. And I guess they weren't on the plane home and nobody knew where they were. And I think Berserker may have gotten suspended, but Hawk quit. Says, I quit. Now, Animal has to clean up the mess because he doesn't want to burn bridges. He's like, all right, well, we're going to end up leaving, but I don't want to burn this bridge. We may have to come back here and work someday. I don't want to piss off Vince McMahon. I don't have the issues with Vince McMahon. So he's going to stick around. He's going to be the professional. He's going to do business the right way. He wants to leave on good terms. He wrestled for them a little while longer. He got hurt. It was a handicap match, him against the Beverly Brothers. It was a double suplex spot. Anyway, he hurt his back. He ends up going out on a Lloyd's of London insurance policy. I don't think Animal wrestled again for another 4 years. Hawk went to Japan. He formed a new version of LOD with Power Warrior. Kensuke Sasaki or Kensuke maybe. I always pronounce his name wrong. But anyway, he became Power Warrior. He was doing the LOD gimmick with somebody else, and that pissed Animal off. Like, what are you doing? It's our gimmick. So eventually they reunited in WCW. They made up because they wanted to make money. They came back to WWE. By that point, the mystique was gone. I mean, it was still cool, the music and everything, what a rush. And they'd come out and get the big pop. But the mystique they had back in the 80s and the early 90s was gone. It was already gone. Hawk had a whole bunch of near-death experiences. Animal talked about he got hepatitis C. Had to go on interferon treatment, which cured him. It actually cured him, and he was cured of the hep C, and so what did he do? He went right back to doing all the things he shouldn't have been doing in the first place. Drinking and partying and drugs and all this stuff. 2000, they came back, LOD 2000, they put Sonny with them, they had these stupid helmets on their head. Hawk hated it so much. If you go back and watch, he took the helmet off, very first appearance, chucked it into the crowd. We never saw the helmets again. He threw it out into the audience, and that was the end of the helmet. I guess he didn't think very highly of the look. And look, they did win the tag titles, I think, and had a little bit of success, but the balloon was off the rose at that point. They were a lot older. They brought in Droz to be the third member, Puke, who was Hawk, Animal, and Puke. He was going to be part of LOD. They did that the stupid storyline where they incorporated real life into it by having Hawk come out. He was drunk. He'd be stumbling around. WCW did the same thing with Scott Hall. The Titantron shove where Hawk climbed to the top of the Titantron and, Droz climbed up and he's going to try to talk him down, but he pushes him. Did he really push him or did Hawk fall? And Hawk falls off the Titantron. That was it. I mean, after that, their run was basically done. Years later, they made one last appearance on WWE television. May of 2003, Eric Bischoff introduces the Legion of Doom. Out they come for a tag team title match against Kane and Rob Van Dam. People would be losing their shit today. How are you bringing these guys in and giving them a title match in their first match? What did they do to earn it? But there they are. They're the LOD. So they're getting a tag team title match. It was something of a tryout. They had not been re-signed. They were hoping to get re-signed. They were hoping to get a full-time deal out of it. But they were one and done. And the thing I will always remember, and the reason maybe that they were one and done, but the thing I will always remember about this match is how Hawk totally no-sold both of their finishers. He no-sold Kane's chokeslam. He no-sold RVD's frog splash. It was back-to-back. So Kane chokeslammed him. RVD came off the top, hit the frog splash, and pinned him. And he just got hit by two finishes. As soon as the referee counts 3 and the match is over, the camera, I think, cuts away. They cut back, and there's Hawk. He's back up on his feet, and he leaves the ring. And I remember that, and I remember looking at Kane. And Kane had this look like he was burning a hole through this guy. I would have loved to have been in the back when Kane came walking back to that curtain to see his reaction. If they were going to get a new contract, that may have been the moment that opportunity died. So it was only a few months later when Hawk passed away. Animal told the story here. He said, he was at home moving furniture. He was in a good place. Hawk at this point was supposedly in a good place. He had become born again. He found religion. He had found the woman of his dreams, and I think got married or remarried. And by all accounts, seemed to be doing well. And he was moving furniture at his house one day. Told his wife, I don't feel too good. I'm going to go lay down. That was it. He never woke up again. Animal got the call. Hawk was dead, 46 years old. His heart just went. Think of all the damage. Think of all the stuff he did to himself. His heart just gave out. It's like Eddie Guerrero. His heart just gave out. Paul Ellering got the call. Paul Ellering had the most touching moment of the whole episode. He remembers the day that he gave the eulogy at the funeral, and he recited the eulogy. It was beautiful. I didn't write it down, but it was a beautiful eulogy. And you could see he was all choked up. He still has a tough time talking about it because these guys were thick as thieves. They were a trio. They went everywhere together. They said Hawk could be his own worst enemy, but he was also the life of the party. I'm sure he was. I would have loved to have partied with Hawk back then. He seemed like the kind of guy you'd want to party with unless he was getting mixed up with the Yakuza. Then I'd go back to my hotel room. But, everybody liked Hawk, but there were issues between him and Animal. Because when you are in a tag team, everything that you do, the way you behave, the way you conduct yourself, it doesn't just affect you and your family and your career, it affects somebody else's family. And it affects somebody else's career. And Animal has every right to be upset about what happened at the end of their WWF run in '92 and some of the other shit that Hawk did because it affected him and his family too. And that's the trouble with being in a tag team. You can do all the right things, but it doesn't matter if you have a partner who's out of control doing all the wrong things. Or if your partner, like these days, your partner, says something to get heat or something, and now you got to worry, shit, is that heat on me? So I understand where Animal is coming from when he talks about the real life issues that the two of them had. But he says at the end of the day, he was my brother. And it was one of the worst days of my life when I got that phone call telling me that he had passed away. Because I really felt like he had turned a corner in his life. And once he did, he never really had an opportunity to enjoy it. They even made Scott Norton cry. I never thought I would see Scott Norton crying on my television. But there he was talking about Hawk and what a great friend he was, and all of the stuff that he did, it all catches up with you.